Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling, I think, the ultimate question of organizational performance.
Right.
How does a company move beyond just being good, profitable, stable, competent, and make that radical, sustained leap to being truly enduringly great?
And for you, the learner, this isn't just some abstract business theory. It's really a blueprint for any ambition, whether you're building a startup, running a nonprofit, or frankly, even just looking at your own personal performance goals.
Okay, so let's set the stage. This deep dive is based on a massive 5-year research project.
A huge project, yeah. They were looking for empirical answers. The research team, they looked at the financial history of hundreds and hundreds of companies.
And they were hunting for a very specific pattern.
A very specific pattern. They identified just 11 that achieved this sustained transition from mediocrity to excellence. Those are our good to great or G2G companies.
And then they meticulously compared them.
Meticulously. They compared them with 17 peer companies that either stayed merely good or, had these short bursts of success that just fizzled out.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the standard for what they called great was just, it was brutal.
Oh, absolutely brutal. They weren't just looking for companies that, beat the general market by a little bit.
Right.
A company only qualified as good to great if its cumulative stock returns were 6.9 times the general market.
6.9 times.
And that's for 15 years following its transition point.
That is a massive, sustained outperformance.
That 6.9 multiplier is the filter. You have to see everything through that lens. We are not talking about luck here or just writing a good economic cycle.
And just for context, what would a company we all think of as a powerhouse look like?
Great question. For context, General Electric, which was often lauded as, this management powerhouse, only outperformed the market by 2.8 times in a comparable 15-year window.
So less than half.
Way less. The G2G companies generated returns so enormous that, look, if you had invested $1 in a fund of the comparison companies in 1965, by the year 2000, you'd have $56.
Okay, not bad.
Not bad. But if you had invested that same dollar in the Good to Great fund, you'd have $471.
Whoa.
That requires something fundamentally different in the DNA of the company.
And what's so fascinating here, before we even get to what they did right, is what the research found they didn't do.
Yes.
We have to start with the initial surprises, right? The counterintuitive non-findings that just disprove so much of the standard management hype.
Absolutely. When the researchers looked for the trigger, for the big bang of the transformation, they expected to find these massive, splashy events.
A big announcement, a new vision.
Exactly. And they found the opposite. The G2G companies did not spend their time focused only on what they needed to do. They spent equal, if not more, time and rigor on what they needed not to do.
And crucially,
what they needed to stop doing.
So what about the usual suspects? The things we always assume drive big change, like big technological breakthroughs, mergers and acquisitions, M&A.
Right, the process of combining companies.
Or those high-profile motivational change programs. Did any of that spark the transformation?
They played virtually no role in igniting the change. Zero.
That's amazing.
Technology, it acted as an accelerator, but much, much later in the process. It was never the initiator.
And big M&A deals.
Huge mergers and acquisitions, which, often feature as the central strategic move in the comparison companies, they actually tended to distract and dilute the good to great companies.
So the transformation was almost invisible at first.
It was subterranean. It wasn't driven by a famous change manager or a new tagline or some massive launch event.
That's the real mind bender for modern management, isn't it?
It is. The executives themselves often reported being totally unaware of the magnitude of the change until years later, looking back.
So it wasn't one grand revolutionary plan executed perfectly from day one.
Not at all. It was a consistent, disciplined process. It was a series of diligently applied good decisions that just accumulated until they reached breakthrough.
Which implies that the source of enduring greatness is internal, it's structural, it's cultural.
Exactly. It's not external or opportunistic. Which brings us directly to the first major finding, the kind of leader required to build that foundational structure.
So it's clear it wasn't the celebrity CEO. If that high-profile outside savior profile is actually negatively correlated with sustained greatness, what did the research conclude? What was the necessary ingredient for leadership?
So the finding was called level 5 leadership, and it was so counterintuitive that the research team, they actually resisted it for a while.
They didn't want to believe it.
They struggled with it. Level 5 leaders are defined by this paradoxical blend. On one hand, extreme personal humility.
Okay.
And on the other, intense professional will.
So when you look at those comparison companies, we often see the leaders everyone expects, right? The charismatic, high-profile figures, the ones who dominate the headlines.
The ones we might think of as Patton or Caesar, ready to charge in and command attention.
Exactly.
But the G2G leaders were, well, they were far more like Lincoln or Socrates. They were quiet, often self-effacing, reserved, almost invisible to the media.
Humble.
Sometimes painfully so, but they possess this ferocious, unwavering resolve to achieve the company's long-term greatness.
So their ambition was pointed outward.
Completely outward, toward the company and its success, not inward toward their own personal fame or wealth or glory.
And the ultimate example of this, the most illustrative, is Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark.
Casey. Oh, absolutely. When he was appointed CEO in 1971, Casey was a perfectly average, kind of stodgy paper company. And Smith, he was an internal hire.
He was a lawyer, right?
An unfashionably dressed, mild-mannered in-house lawyer who, by his own admission, said he didn't even seem particularly qualified for the job.
But his personal history tells a different story.
It tells the whole story. It gives you a perfect glimpse into that level 5 resolve. Smith grew up poor. He worked the day shift at International Harvester while paying his way through college.
Night school.
And night school at Harvard Law. There's this famous anecdote. While working at the mill, he lost part of a finger in an accident. He went straight from the accident to his night class and then returned to work the very next day.
Wow.
That is the kind of stoic, enduring will that doesn't need applause. It just needs to keep pushing forward.
And he channeled that ferocious, quiet will into one of the most radical decisions in the company's history.
Sell the mills.
You have to understand, this wasn't just selling some random asset.
No.
This was selling the very core of Casey's identity.
It was devastating internally. Smith determined that the company's traditional core business, this coated paper, was structurally doomed. The economics were terrible. It was doomed to mediocrity.
So he just cut it loose.
He decided to shed the identity, the assets, everything that defined Casey, including the original mill in Kimberly, Wisconsin.
And why? To force the company into a completely new arena.
To force them to transition entirely to consumer products, Huggies, Kleenex, which put them directly into competition with world-class rivals like Procter & Gamble.
That must have felt like corporate suicide at the time.
Oh, the business press savaged the move. Wall Street analysts downgraded the stock. They believed Casey was just throwing away its heritage.
But Smith.
He never wavered. He focused entirely on the long-term goal of building a world-class consumer business. And 25 years later, Kimberly-Clark owned Scott Paper and was beating P&G in 6 of 8 product categories.
An unbelievable turnaround.
And that leap from good to great began with that stoic, humble lawyer making a ferocious, unpopular decision based on confronting the brutal facts.
And when he was asked late in life to reflect on his performance, his incredible performance, what did he say?
He just said, I never stopped trying to become qualified for the job.
Classic level 5 response.
Absolutely. Deflecting credit, attributing success to hard work, not some innate genius.
And we see that same pattern in another leader, Coleman Mockler at Gillette.
Yes. Mockler was the epitome of the quiet, courteous, almost patrician gentleman, but he was a fighter.
A quiet fighter.
A quiet fighter. He faced 3 separate hostile takeover bids from these aggressive corporate raiders, most notably Ronald Perelman, who just wanted to strip the company for parts.
And as the CEO, Mockler could have easily just given in.
Easily. He could have taken a massive personal profit and retired a very, very wealthy man, especially since Perelman offered a 44% premium on the stock price. It would have been the easy way out for everyone on the management team.
But he didn't.
He possessed the professional will to fight for the future of the company, for its long-term shareholders. He knew that if they capitulated, it would kill the enormous R&D investment Gillette was making in its next-generation shaving systems.
The sensor and later the Mach 3.
Exactly. He fought the raiders for years, enduring incredible stress. And the result, it proved him right. Shareholders who held on to Gillette stock came out 3 times better off than if they had just taken that immediate 44% premium.
It's just a perfect contrast to what the research calls the I-centric leader that we see in the comparison companies.
Absolutely. Look at Al Dunlap at Scott Paper, which was Kimberly-Clark's direct comparison. Dunlap was the archetypal celebrity CEO.
Rambo and pinstripes.
He loved that nickname. He boasted about earning $100 million for 603 days of work. And he did this by slashing R&D, cutting people, selling off assets. He wrote this massive book just celebrating himself.
And the research concluded that this kind of high-profile outside savior is negatively correlated with sustained greatness.
Negatively correlated, because their ambition is so often directed inward.
Or look at Lee Iacocca at Chrysler.
A brilliant guy. He rescued the company in the 1980s, became a national hero, but he struggled intensely to leave the center stage.
He kept postponing retirement.
Over and over, and later he even tried a hostile takeover of the very company he had saved.
So the problem isn't that they weren't brilliant.
No, it's that they built a company that was dependent on their genius. Iacocca's turnaround was unsustained because the underlying system, the culture, it wasn't set up to thrive without his unique presence.
Whereas a true level 5 leader,
They set up their successors for success. They ensure the company's greatness continues long after they retire.
that focus on the enduring institution rather than the temporary leader, that's the key, isn't it?
It is. David Maxwell at Fannie Mae, who transformed the company into a giant earnings machine, retired while he was still at the very peak of his success.
Because he felt the company would be ill-served if he stayed too long.
And famously, when his $20 million retirement package became a political issue, he instructed his successor not to pay him the remaining $5.5 million. He contributed it to the Fannie Mae Foundation for Low-Income Housing.
Wow.
His ambition was entirely vested in the organization's purpose.
And they deflect credit almost religiously.
Almost religiously. When asked about their success, G2G leaders frequently attribute it to luck, timing, or most commonly just having great people.
Alan Wurtzel of Circuit City.
Facing his own company's monumental turnaround, he listed luck as the #1 factor. He said they were in a great industry with the wind at our backs, even though their performance just crushed everyone else in that same industry.
Joe Cullman of Philip Morris did the same thing.
Exemplified this modesty. He attributed his company's stellar growth to having great colleagues and luck. He even titled his book, I'm a Lucky Guy.
So the core difference is this.
Level 5 leaders look out the window when talking about success, crediting external factors or team members, but they look in the mirror when talking about failure, taking full responsibility. The comparison CEOs, they often do the exact reverse.
Okay, so we have the level 5 leader in place, humble, yet intensely driven, focused on the institution. The next logical step, conventionally, would be for them to announce the new strategic vision and rally the troops.
Right. Get everyone excited about the new direction.
But the research completely flipped this script. They landed on this principle of first who, then what.
And this is a big one. The G2G leaders spent a massive amount of time and energy first getting the right people on the bus.
The wrong people off the bus.
And the right people in the right seats. Only after they felt they had the talent density and the cultural fit did they figure out exactly where to drive the bus.
That sequence feels utterly counterintuitive to the traditional model of strategic planning. Why would you prioritize people before you even know the destination?
There are 3 incredibly simple but powerful truths at work here. First, if your people are committed to the team and to each other, rather than just the specific destination or the product line, they are infinitely more adaptable to radical change.
So if the world shifts,
And it always does.
they don't panic and jump ship.
Exactly. They just turn to the level 5 leader and ask, okay, new roadmap, where are we going now?
They stay because they trust the people on the bus with them.
Exactly. The second truth is that the right people are self-motivated. If you have the right people, you don't need elaborate motivational programs, you don't need to tightly manage them, and you certainly don't need a charismatic cult of personality.
They have their own internal engine.
They're driven by an internal standard of excellence. And third, and this is the most fundamental, a great vision is utterly meaningless if you don't have the great people necessary to execute it. Talent density is the prerequisite for genius strategy.
Okay, let's think about Dick Cooley at Wells Fargo in the early 1970s. He knew banking was about to be radically reshaped by deregulation.
Right, but the specifics were cloudy. He didn't know what it would look like, so what was his strategy?
His strategy wasn't a business plan.
No, it was a talent acquisition plan.
Yeah.
He focused maniacally on injecting an endless stream of talent. He and his chairman hired outstanding people whenever they found them.
Even if they didn't have a specific job opening for them.
Even then, Cooley knew the environment would shift, so he reasoned. If I'm not smart enough to see the changes that are coming, they will be, and they will be flexible enough to deal with them.
So when the industry upheaval finally came,
Wells Fargo wasn't paralyzed. Its talent pool instantly organized. They experimented, they adapted.
And this highlights the failure of the opposite model, the genius with 1,000 helpers.
Right. Henry Singleton of Teledyne provides the classic counterexample. Singleton was an absolute genius, lauded by Warren Buffett himself.
And he built this massive, complex conglomerate.
130 profit centers held together by his singular intellectual discipline. He made all the key capital allocation decisions. But he built an empire that was totally reliant on his brain.
So what happened when he stepped away?
When Singleton stepped away from day-to-day management in the mid-1980s, the company's cumulative stock returns just better. They imploded. They fell 66% behind the general market.
He built a brilliant empire, but he failed to build an enduring institution.
Exactly.
Now, I think a lot of people listening right now would assume that if you want the best people, you have to pay the absolute highest dollar. They'd expect this section to be dominated by findings about massive stock options and guaranteed bonuses.
And it's one of the most stunning non-findings of the whole study.
Executive compensation was largely a non-factor.
A non-factor in the transformation. There was no systematic pattern linking the structure of compensation, whether it was cash, stock, short-term, long-term incentives, to making the leap from good to great.
They analyzed every data point.
Every quantifiable data point. In fact, G2G executives actually received slightly less total cash compensation 10 years after their transition point than their mediocre comparison counterparts.
That's incredible. So the motivation wasn't primarily financial.
No, it goes back to that inherent drive to be part of something great. They paid enough to get the right people, for sure. But the real motivator was the intense, intrinsic drive to perform alongside other high performers and to contribute to a winning team.
The Level 5 leader's goal is to create an environment where the right people just self-select in.
And self-motivate, exactly.
This focus requires what the research called rigor. And it's really important to distinguish that from ruthlessness.
Oh, very important. Ruthlessness is characterized by, mindlessly hacking and cutting during difficult times or making capricious decisions to fire people without clear criteria.
Rigor is different.
Rigor, conversely, is the consistent, exacting application of high standards at all times across the entire organization, particularly regarding who is allowed on the bus.
Nucor, the steel company, they exemplified this rigor in their hiring philosophy.
They really did. Nucor made a conscious decision to locate their plants in rural areas and intentionally hire farmers in places like Norfolk, Nebraska, rather than traditional steelworkers.
Why farmers?
Their belief was simple. You can teach a farmer how to make steel, but you cannot teach a farmer's work ethic to someone who lacks it.
Wow. That is the ultimate expression of first who.
It is. They valued inherent character and discipline over existing technical skills.
And that standard translated into their culture, including how people were treated if they didn't meet that high bar.
Right. So while Nucor had very low turnover among established employees, in the first year of a new plant, turnover could be as high as 50%.
50%.
But those who stayed became the highest paid steelworkers in the world, compensated via these high-pressure team bonuses directly tied to productivity. The system was rigorous, not cruel, because it was universally applied to the system itself.
We also see rigor in Wells Fargo's decision during the acquisition of Crocker Bank in 1986. That was a really decisive moment.
Oh, absolutely. Wells Fargo terminated 1,600 Crocker managers on day one, including nearly all the top executives.
And this wasn't just a cost-cutting measure.
Not at all. It was cultural rigor.
Yeah.
The Crocker managers were steeped in this old-style, inefficient banker culture with marbled executive dining rooms and expensive perks.
And Wells Fargo, led by Carl Reichardt, was the opposite.
Spartan, performance-driven. They judged that the 1,600 people would never fit the DNA of their bus, so they made a surgical, decisive cut. They prioritized the integrity of their culture above all else. They understood that letting people linger in the wrong seat causes more damage than decisive, albeit painful, action.
So, if you're listening and you're trying to build a rigorous team, the research boiled this down to 3 practical disciplines.
3 practical disciplines that these level 5 leaders and their teams followed. First, when in doubt, don't hire, keep looking.
That takes a lot of discipline.
It does. Alan Wurtzel at Circuit City, he limited his company's growth rate based on his executive team's ability to attract and hire the right people. They believe that compromising on talent now would cost them 10 times more down the road.
Okay, second discipline.
When you know you need a people change, act. But first, check if the person is just in the wrong seat.
It's not just about firing.
It's It's not.
Hmm.
Coleman Mockler at Gillette spent 55% of his first 2 years moving or changing 38 of the top 50 people. The point is maximizing talent. Sometimes a brilliant person is failing because they are simply misaligned with the role.
And the third discipline is crucial, especially for leaders.
Very crucial. Put your best people on your biggest opportunities, not your biggest problems. This is the acid test of great management.
And the comparison companies failed this test.
Frequently. They put their A players on the sinking ships, the biggest problems, wasting their talent on damage control that, at best, only ever achieves mediocrity.
And Philip Morris is a great example of maximizing opportunity.
Perfect example. In the early 1960s, Philip Morris derived less than 1% of its revenue internationally. CEO Joe Coleman identified international growth as the single biggest opportunity for long-term growth.
And what did you do?
He put his most capable, dynamic people on that small, nascent division. They managed their problems to be merely good, but they invested their best resources to build their opportunities to be great. It was a massive reason for their subsequent sustained growth.
Okay, so you have the right people on the bus. Before you map out some audacious new vision, the next crucial step is grounding your team in reality.
Right.
The data suggests that breakthrough results don't come from a single, inspirational, audacious idea, but from a series of good decisions that accumulate over time.
And you just can't make good decisions unless you first confront the most brutal facts of your current reality.
This is perfectly demonstrated by the fate of two old-line grocery chains facing the exact same existential threat in the 1960s.
A&P and Kroger. And the threat was the emergence of the massive superstore model, which made their traditional small storefronts completely obsolete.
A&P, which Forbes dubbed the Hermit Kingdom, was run by executives who were just paralyzed by tradition.
Utterly paralyzed. Their primary question was not, what does the market require, but what would Mr. Hartford do? Referring to the deceased founder.
They were more worried about preserving the past glory than accepting the future.
And get this, A&P even opened successful experimental stores called the Golden Key, which proved that the superstore model worked for them.
But because the findings contradicted their sacred cows, their self-image, their past facts, they refused to integrate the findings into the core business.
They mounted a furious, spirited defense against reality. They just stuck their heads in the sand.
Kroger, on the other hand, confronted the brutal truth head-on. By 1970, they accepted that their old model was extinct.
Lyle Everingham, Kroger's CEO, he just accepted the data. He said that once they looked at the research, there was really no question about what we had to do, so we just did it.
And they did it methodically.
They decided to eliminate, change, or replace every single store and depart every geographical region that didn't fit the new superstore reality. They rebuilt their entire system, block by block, over 2 decades. It was painful, but it was honest.
That willingness to deal with reality while maintaining the drive to win brings us to the core psychological finding of this section, the Stockdale paradox.
Right, and the paradox requires you to simultaneously hold 2 seemingly contradictory forces. You must maintain unwavering faith that you can and will prevail in the end, regardless of the difficulties.
Okay, the faith part.
And D, you must have the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality.
And this concept is named after Admiral Jim Stockdale, who was held prisoner for 8 years in the infamous Hanoi Hilton during the Vietnam War. His survival story is absolutely riveting.
It is, and particularly who didn't make it out.
Right?
Stockdale survived and even led the prisoners because he never lost faith that he would get out and that he would eventually prevail and turn the experience into the defining event of his life. But when he was asked who died in captivity, he didn't say the weak or the cynical.
He said the optimists.
The optimists.
That's the part that always just stops you cold.
It does. The optimists were the ones who kept setting these internal deadlines. We'll be out by Christmas. And when Christmas passed, they'd say, definitely by Easter.
And when Easter passed...
And then the next Christmas, their fragile hope was just shattered. They died of a broken heart.
So Stockdale's discipline
was to never confuse hope with reality. You never lose the ultimate faith. But you must confront the brutal fact that you are currently in the Hanoi Hilton and you will not be released by the end of the year.
And this applies directly to corporate culture. When you look at the comparison companies, often the charismatic, eye-centric leaders like Roy Ash at Addressograph.
They created a culture where people were terrified to bring up bad news. Ash set forth this highly ambitious vision to dominate office automation, but he insisted they were still winning the war, even as the evidence mounted that the plan was doomed and the company was sliding toward bankruptcy.
So people were more worried about preserving the leader's ego than preserving the company's viability.
Exactly.
In contrast, G2G leaders actively worked to create a climate where the truth was heard, not suppressed or filtered. What were the basic practices they used to ensure those brutal facts surfaced?
There were 4. First, lead with questions, not answers. The level 5 leader understands that if they walk into a room with the answer already defined, the conversation is over.
It's not a real conversation.
No. Alan Wurtzel of Circuit City, when they were facing near bankruptcy, he resisted the urge to be the savior with the solution. He constantly probed with why, so often and so rigorously that his team nicknamed him the prosecutor.
He led them to clarity through their own responses.
Exactly. Second, engage in dialogue and debate, not coercion. G2G teams have this distinct penchant for vigorous argument, battling fiercely to find the best answers.
So it wasn't about being nice.
It was about being honest. Ken Iverson at Nucor actively promoted this kind of open, fact-based debate among his leadership team. The decisions were collective, and once they were unified, they moved forward. Comparison companies often suffered from groupthink,
Where hierarchy dictated the outcome.
Right. Third, conduct autopsies without blame. Mistakes are inevitable. The G2G differentiator was how they processed the failures.
Like Philip Morris and the 7-Up acquisition.
A highly visible debacle. They sold it years later at a massive loss. And CEO Joe Coleman, he openly dissected the mistake, dedicating pages in his public memoir to the clinical analysis.
He took responsibility.
He took full responsibility. This was another Joe Coleman plan that didn't work, and he ensured the organization extracted maximum learning from the costly tuition they had paid, rather than allowing a culture of finger-pointing to develop.
And finally, they actively built mechanisms to institutionalize this.
Red flag mechanisms. Pitney Bowes created a long-standing tradition of forums. They explicitly called for people to tell senior executives what the company was doing wrong, focusing specifically on the scary, squiggly things they were avoiding.
So it wasn't a suggestion box.
It was a mandatory, institutionalized mechanism for surfacing uncomfortable truths. Like Churchill creating a statistical office separate from the chain of command, G2G leaders demanded unfiltered data because facts, however ugly, are always better than dreams.
So after confronting reality, the G2G companies didn't leap into complex, ambitious strategies. They sought simplicity. This brings us to the famous parable the research used, the fox and the hedgehog. How does that illustrate the path to greatness?
The 20th century philosopher Isaiah Berlin used this ancient Greek parable. The fox knows many things. It devises these complex, intricate strategies to attack the hedgehog.
The hedgehog?
The dowdy hedgehog knows one big thing. It simply curls up into a perfect spiky ball. The fox always loses.
G2G companies are hedgehogs.
They're hedgehogs. They boil down a complex world into one simple, crystalline concept that guides all their actions.
And the beauty of this concept is that it's not based on wishful thinking. It's based on those brutal facts and that self-awareness we just talked about.
Right. And Walgreens is a perfect illustration of a company that found its simple, singular truth.
They achieved spectacular returns, not by chasing every retail fad.
No electronics, cosmetics, greeting cards.
But by boiling its strategy down to the simple hedgehog concept of being the best at convenient drugstores.
That concept was simple, it was deeply understood, and it was applied with religious consistency across every single decision they made.
So how did that singular focus manifest itself in their strategy? Because convenience can mean a lot of things.
For Walgreens, it meant things that seemed contradictory to outside observers, like tight clustering.
Right, they would put 9 stores per mile in some cities.
Which might seem cannibalistic, but it wasn't. It maximized their market share penetration, it cut down on distribution costs, and most importantly, it solidified their identity as the most convenient option for neighborhood customers, which drove their key economic metric.
Meanwhile, their comparison company, Eckerd, behaved exactly like the fox.
Exactly. Lurching from one complex strategy to the next, acquiring unrelated businesses, a candy company, department stores, even American Home Video. They just diluted their resources and momentum.
So the hedgehog concept isn't a goal or a strategy or a plan. It's an intersection.
It's an intersection of deep understanding along 3 key dimensions, which you can visualize as 3 overlapping circles.
The first circle is what you can be the best in the world at. And just as importantly, what you realize you cannot be the best at.
The second is what you are deeply passionate about. This is the energy source, the intrinsic motivation that drives the level 5 leader and the people on the bus.
And the third circle is what drives your economic engine, that crucial denominator, the profit per X metric.
And the core insight is that you need the discipline intersection of all three to achieve sustained, transcendent results.
That first circle, what you can be the best in the world at, that seems like the hardest hurdle because it requires painful self-assessment.
It's incredibly hard. Abbott Laboratories, in 1964, they faced this critical juncture. Even though 99% of its revenue came from pharmaceuticals, they confronted the brutal fact that they had lost the race to be the best pharmaceutical company. Merck had too much of a lead.
That must have been a crushing realization.
It was. But instead of delusional hope, they pivoted. They redefined their niche.
What did they pivot to?
They realized they could become the best in the world at creating products that contribute to cost-effective healthcare. So diagnostics, nutritionals, hospital supplies. This subtle shift moved them out of a zero-sum battle they were losing and into a world-class successful niche where they could genuinely dominate.
And their comparison, Upjohn, suffered from that delusion.
They kept chasing the dream of beating Merck and then subsequently diversified wildly into unrelated areas like plastics and chemicals. The lack of self-imposed limits led to their profits dwindling until they were acquired.
Okay, let's talk about the third circle, the economic engine. This is where the profit per X denominator becomes this powerful guiding star.
It really is. It's about finding the single ratio, the denominator that has the greatest impact on your economic viability, and then focusing the entire organization on maximizing it.
Wells Fargo, facing the commoditization of banking, shifted its focus from profit per loan to
profit per employee.
And what did that do?
It instantly forced them to be ruthless about efficiency and talent density. If profit per employee is your measure, you must maximize the output of every single person, which supported their rigorous talent culture.
And Walgreens, tied to their convenience concept, shifted to
profit per customer visit.
Nucor, the steel company,
naturally focused on profit per ton of finished steel. That simple metric forced every decision, from technology investment to the team-based bonus structure, to align perfectly. This simple, single denominator, it cuts through all the complexity and guides management behavior better than any mission statement ever could.
So it sounds like arriving at your Hedgehog concept is not a quick brainstorming session.
Oh, far from it. On average, the G2G companies took about 4 years of iterative debate, asking the right questions, autopsying results without blame, and learning, all guided within the context of those three circles.
It's an organic process of discovery.
It's discovery, not invention. It's about recognizing a quiet truth that was already there.
Okay, so we've established the foundation. A level 5 leader, the right people, confronting brutal facts, and this simple hedgehog concept. The mechanism that translates all of this into sustained greatness is discipline.
Right, but not the type of top-down corporate discipline most people imagine.
It's not about a tyrant at the top.
Not at all. The research shows that sustained great results depend upon a culture of self-disciplined people who take disciplined action, fanatically consistent with the three circles. It's a culture of discipline, not just a company with discipline imposed from above.
This is the concept of freedom within a framework. And I think the best analogy is the airline pilot.
It's a great analogy. A commercial pilot has ultimate responsibility for hundreds of lives and incredible freedom to navigate complex weather or air traffic control changes. But that freedom exists only within the framework of highly developed, strict operating procedures and safety protocols.
You don't want your pilot improvising the landing approach.
Absolutely not. And the G2G companies applied this concept universally.
Circuit City applied this beautifully, which enabled them to become the McDonald's of big-ticket retailing.
Right, operating a geographically dispersed system effectively by remote control. They had great entrepreneurial store managers with ultimate responsibility, but they operated within a highly consistent, rigorously documented system for things like inventory control, customer service standards, and pricing.
That built-in discipline enabled them to scale consistently without diluting the quality.
Exactly.
And this discipline wasn't just organizational. It became a personal fanaticism. The research called it the rinsing your cottage cheese factor.
This odd analogy comes from Dave Scott, the 6-time Ironman champion. Despite burning 5,000 calories a day during his intense training, he would still rinse his cottage cheese to get rid of the extra fat.
Did he need to do that?
He didn't need to do it to win the race, But it represented a deep, ingrained discipline. It was one more small, consistent step added to thousands of others that created a culture of excellence. And the G2G companies shared this fanaticism for continual, small, rigorous improvements within the constraints of their core concept.
And this rigor must be applied to the system itself, not tyrannically applied to the people.
That's the key distinction between discipline and tyranny. Many comparison companies relied on these tyrannical disciplinarians like Stanley Galt at Rubbermaid, whose success was entirely dependent on their strong personality and often imploded when they left.
G2G leaders discipline the system and themselves first.
Yes. Carl Reichardt at Wells Fargo is the perfect model of a level 5 leader rinsing the executive suite's cottage cheese. When he focused on maximizing profit per employee and confronting banking reality.
Okay, set the tone.
He set the tone by freezing executive salaries for 2 years, shutting the executive dining room, eliminating Christmas trees for management, and famously using a beat-up old chair while listening to proposals.
He was signaling that management would be the first to sacrifice comfort for performance.
And that symbolic rigor was totally absent at Bank of America, whose executives preserved their expensive, exclusive downtown tower and all the perks that go with old-style banking.
Why rinse the cottage cheese when life is so good?
Exactly. Reichardt's actions created a self-disciplined environment. The BOFA culture required management oversight and control.
But the most critical manifestation of this discipline, the most important one, is fanatical adherence to the hedgehog concept.
Yes, the willingness to say no to seductive opportunities that fall outside the 3 circles.
This is where discipline becomes a constraint.
A powerful constraint. Pitney Bowes, facing the loss of its monopoly on postage meters, did not panic. They disciplined themselves to define their hedgehog concept, to be the best in messaging that requires sophisticated back-office equipment.
And everything they did after that fit that definition.
Every subsequent investment, high-end faxes, mail processors, internet links, stayed rigorously within that precise sphere, fueling decades of sustained growth.
Let's look at the contrast between R.J. Reynolds, RJR, and Philip Morris following the 1964 Surgeon General's report. That was an existential shock to the tobacco industry.
A huge shock. Facing brutal facts, RJR reacted like the fox thrashing about with these ill-considered acquisitions that had nothing to do with their core strength. They bought the ocean container shipping company Sealand.
They diluted their focus and resources.
Completely. Philip Morris, however, displayed extraordinary discipline. They doubled down. They defined their hedgehog concept as building global brands and high-margin consumables. Tobacco, beer, food.
They focused on brand-building mastery, which was their core strength.
Exactly. They stuck to what they could be the best in the world at. And the difference in results is just stark. From 1964 until RJR's buyout in 1989, $1 invested in Philip Morris beat $1 invested in R.J. Reynolds by over 4 times.
Purely due to the discipline of adherence to their core concept.
Purely.
So the paradox here is that the more an organization has the discipline to stay within its 3 circles, the more opportunities for growth seem to naturally emerge.
Right. The challenge shifts from opportunity creation to opportunity selection.
And that's the key insight.
It is. Great companies are more likely to die of indigestion from too much opportunity than starvation from too little. This is why the stop doing list becomes more important than the to-do list. The discipline lies in what you reject.
Okay, so we've built this entire framework without really mentioning technology as a driver. In our current era, we're obsessed with disruption and innovation, and we often assume technology is the primary cause of greatness.
We do.
But the research gives technology a very specific, and I'd say a very limited role.
A very limited role. Technology has virtually nothing to do with igniting a transformation. It is merely an accelerator of momentum once the hedgehog concept is deeply understood.
So the entire framework, level 5, first 2, brutal facts, hedgehog, discipline, all of that has to be in place first.
It has to be in place. The key question for G2G companies regarding any new tech was simple. Does this technology fit directly with our hedgehog concept? If yes, pioneer it. If no, achieve parity or just ignore it entirely.
The timing of technology application is critical here. The pioneering application usually came late in the transition, not at the start.
Late in the game. Look again at Walgreens. Their transformation was driven by the convenience concept. They pioneered the application of technology in the late 1970s by investing massively in the intercom satellite system.
What did that do?
It linked all their stores to a central, real-time pharmacy database. This was a cutting-edge technological investment that directly reinforced their core promise of speed and convenience decades before the internet was even a business tool.
And when the internet did arrive, During the dot-com frenzy, they were cautious.
Very cautious. While comparison companies rushed headlong into these speculative investments, Walgreens executives paused. They engaged in rigorous internal dialogue, asking, how can we use the web to enhance our convenience concept? How does it tie to profit per customer visit?
So they made thoughtful, measured investments.
They waited until the technology matured and they saw how it could specifically accelerate their existing proven model. It was a sharp contrast to the speculative frenzy of a company like drugstore.com.
Gillette showed the same pattern in manufacturing. They invested $200 million for the sensor shaving system.
And that money wasn't spent on marketing hype, it was spent on developing breakthrough manufacturing technology like laser welding and protecting that process like a secret formula.
Because it directly supported their Hedgehog concept.
Exactly. Producing high-end shaving systems that competitors could not easily replicate. The technology accelerated their existing superiority in product quality.
So it sounds like the whole idea that technological change is the principal cause of decline for once great companies is actually a myth.
It's absolutely a myth. The research found that companies decline not because they failed to adopt a new technology, but because they failed to confront the brutal facts and maintain the discipline necessary to adhere to their hedgehog concept.
A&P failed because its leaders ignored reality.
Not because they lagged Kroger in adopting scanning technology. Even Ken Iverson, the CEO who pioneered mini-mill technology at Nucor, he attributed 80% of Nucor's success to the culture.
The disciplined people focused on the simple hedgehog concept.
Not the machines.
And this focus on culture and consistent application brings us to the ultimate metaphor for how these transformations actually occur. The flywheel effect.
Right. G2G transformations are not about sudden, miraculous events. They're characterized by a quiet, deliberate, cumulative process. Imagine a massive, heavy flywheel.
And it takes tremendous effort just to get it moving initially.
Tremendous effort. You push it turn after painstaking turn in one consistent direction. And there is no single aha moment when the transformation happens.
The executives at Casey and Nucor reported being genuinely unaware of the magnitude of the change until they were years into it.
Completely unaware.
So if you're listening and you feel like you're doing all the right things, you've got the right team, the strategy is clear, but you aren't seeing results yet, this suggests you just need more turns on the flywheel.
That's the core lesson. Circuit City, for example, took 9 years to reach its breakthrough point. Kimberly-Clark required a gradual process. It required thousands of additional pushes after that initial drastic decision.
But once everything aligns,
once the level 5 leader, the disciplined people, the hedgehog concept, and the technology accelerators align, the cumulative pushes generate this massive self-sustaining momentum. The results seem exponential, and outsiders perceive it as an overnight success.
And this stands in sharp contrast to the doom loop that they observed in the comparison companies.
The doom loop is the result of impatience. Comparison companies tried to skip the arduous build-up stage. They were lurching back and forth, constantly searching for a single killer innovation or a large, misguided acquisition.
Warner Lambert, Gillette's comparison company.
They frequently flip-flop their strategy. They'd try to be a consumer products company one year, then they were trying to go after Merck the next. This inconsistent direction meant they never built sustained momentum. They just wasted resources with every strategic flip-flop.
Two big mediocrities joined together never make one great company,
as the saying goes.
And crucially, G2G leaders don't waste energy trying to align or motivate people through endless meetings.
No, the flywheel itself does the talking. When people on the team see the simple plan is working, when they see tangible results accumulating from their consistent, disciplined pushes, they line up to throw their shoulders against the wheel.
Because they want to be part of the winning team.
Exactly. Momentum creates its own alignment and motivation.
That concludes our deep dive into the DNA of enduring greatness. What's amazing is how few levers they actually pulled. The entire framework synthesizes into this concise, chronological, and cumulative path.
Level 5 leader
leads to first 2.
Which leads to confronting brutal facts.
Which clarifies the hedgehog concept.
Which is executed by a culture of discipline.
Which is accelerated by technology.
All creating flywheel momentum.
It's a powerful path to sustained great results. And the research shows that this framework is essentially the operational prequel to the findings of another book, Built to Last.
Oh, right. To achieve enduring great company status, that iconic stature, you must then apply the BPL concepts. Specifically, discovering your company's core values and purpose beyond just making money, what they call core ideology.
And embracing the duality of preserving the core while relentlessly stimulating progress.
Exactly.
The hedgehog concept becomes the perfect filter for defining a truly big, hairy, audacious goal, a BHAG.
It does. If you're setting a massive, challenging goal, a good BHAG must be consistent with the three circles. It helps you avoid the trap of mere bravado.
The example of Boeing is instructive here.
They made the massive, hairy commitment to dominate the commercial jet market. But it fit their deep understanding of their potential to be the best at safety, quality, and engineering, which was leveraged from their military aircraft expertise. It was ambition based on rigorous self-knowledge, not just desire.
So if you are working to elevate your team, your company, or even just your own personal work, this entire framework is ultimately a study in focus, rigor, and simplification.
It's about channeling resources and energy into the very few things that truly matter.
And that leads to the final provocative thought that emerges from that fanatical adherence to the hedgehog concept.
The path to achieving simplicity and success does not lie in finding more things to add to your company's strategy or your own personal schedule.
The secret to simplifying and achieving sustained success lies not in generating more to-do lists, but in the discipline of identifying and religiously maintaining your stop-doing list.
Yes. The opportunities, projects, or distractions that fall outside your three circles.
The comparison companies constantly suffered the doom loop because they lacked the courage and the humility to say no to opportunities that didn't fit.
They diluted their most precious resource. Discipline focus. Greatness is achieved by having the rigor to stop doing what isn't serving your core purpose.
A truly rigorous, deep synthesis of management principles. Thank you for guiding us through this deep dive.
My pleasure.
And thank you for listening. Until next time.